This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and our podcast comes to you from our WeatherWorks headquarters here in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me for this week's episode is my fellow weather prophet, Mike Mahalik. Hello, Michael.
Weather prophet, huh? Reaching
Yeah.
back to the Bible, I see. Is that what we're
Old
going with
Testament.
here, or
I don't know.
you won't find a prophet Mahalik?
I'm always with those funny descriptions, but I figure I give everyone a break. You know, I'm not that funny, but I like to think that I am sometimes, at least.
Yeah, a lot of people think you're funny.
I know, funny looking. But all right, anyway, Mike, you know what? We continue to draw a good audience when we do these weather terms podcasts. So, we're here now with part 3.
Yeah, I know. Part 3. That's great. I mean, I'm so happy that our listeners are so interested in these weather terms.
And we cover a lot of terms, and I think we're gonna go over a bunch more this time today.
Yeah, we need somebody to help us out with this, though, right?
Yeah, bring him in.
Where's Mike Priante?
Hi, what's up, guys?
Hey,
I'm here.
you want to do a podcast today?
I don't know. I just woke up.
Oh, you're supposed to be busy listening to the podcast and getting ready to edit it. You know, with all your producing.
Yeah, I guess. Well, no, anyway. No, I'm excited for another. I love these episodes. The weather term episodes are my favorites. I think it's because, well, we have a lot of terms we talk about, and I think there's stuff that many of you probably don't know or didn't know about. For example, just an example term here like wind shear. I bet nobody knew what wind shear is. But after this episode, you will. So stick around, and we'll definitely get to that. But I think the first term will be started by Brad. Is that right?
I think we're each going to do one term that we've already covered before, just to kind of get a bit of a review, and then we'll bring on a few new ones also. And these are going to be more favoring the warm season now that we're headed into. We're in the middle of April now, and of course the severe weather aspect is going to become more of a topic here going forward, and then eventually hurricane season as we get further into summer. So here's a term that we have not used yet before, and you may have heard it. It's called an anvil, and it's not what you would think it would be.
Ooh, calling me.
Yeah, well,
It's the thing that Wile E. Coyote dropped on
exactly.
the Roadrunner, right?
From Acme Company, yeah, and they would always bring the anvils.
How did he think, by the way, that he would put up a tightrope and would walk across there with an anvil and that would work? Explain to me how he thought that would work.
Some strong. A lot of people may not even know what we're talking about, Mike.
I'm sorry.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, those cartoons are great.
Of course the wire's going to break. I mean, come on. Anyway. Sorry, Brad.
I like when Coyote. I know we're getting off the. I loved when Coyote would talk, though. He was very smart and he was intelligent.
Yeah, there was
Coyote.
There was that one episode
Super genius.
Yeah, he talked to like Bugs Bunny or something, and he was trying to catch him. Yeah, and he was super smart. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to weather here. All right, anvil though. We're gonna go with weather anvil, and what we're talking about is if you ever seen a really big thunderstorm in the middle of summertime, and we're talking ones that like get above 40, 50,000 feet. Sometimes they don't even get that high in the Northeast. I mean, but we see this sometimes. And what it's actually called is cumulonimbus incus. And incus is the Latin term for anvil. And what happens is the clouds here in the troposphere, they get so high. And what happens is they go as far as they can. Basically, you need cold air aloft to get a good thunderstorm. And usually that means we get the instability and allows for these thunderheads to get 40, 50, sometimes even 60,000 feet up into the atmosphere. However, it's going to hit a point where it can't go any higher. And it actually hits the tropopause where the stratosphere begins. And really what happens, in essence, the air begins to warm again. It's still pretty cold. It's still below freezing. But at the same time, the clouds don't want to go any higher, and they kind of hit a ceiling, if you will, and they get spread out. And what it looks like is you get this big thunderstorm, then all of a sudden you get this kind of like anvil looking cloud way up top there, and it kind of gets spread out along the ceiling of the atmosphere, if you will. And that kind of takes on that anvil shape. And it really signifies the thunderstorm is at its mature stage, and it's basically as strong as it's going to get. Have you guys ever seen an anvil?
Yeah,
I've seen them,
100%.
yeah.
I like how they get thin and wispy, and they really spread out at
Yeah.
the top there. I mean, it's very interesting looking. Even there's a lot of things that can happen in those big thunderstorms that you can see, and sometimes you can see like striations in like a rotating cell and stuff like that too. But yeah, anvil is just a classic feature of a strong thunderstorm
And,
for
and,
sure.
to, and to put it in I guess maybe the listeners' terms a little bit better. I mean, everyone knows, 40, 50, 60,000 feet is pretty high. But, we're kind of talking about 5 to 9 miles high. Can you imagine a cloud that's like 8 miles high? I mean, that's just like, that's crazy. But that's about how high they get, even higher as you get into some of those big storms out in the plains. And it's actually kind of where planes like to fly. Most commercial jets are up there 35 to 40,000 feet, and they want to get those stronger winds and kind of push them along, or sometimes they're going against the wind too. But basically that's where we're talking, all the way at the top of the troposphere where these storms get. But yeah, anvils, if you see one, and just look it up on the internet if you want to see a good picture of one, because you see them a lot in the summertime.
Yeah. And these big storms can certainly produce some hail. And I think Mike was going to talk about hail and how exactly that forms. And it's definitely not sleet, correct?
100%.
Mike, how the hell are you?
Oh, bad
Uh,
jokes
I
again.
All
should go
right,
back to
sorry,
bed.
move
I'm
on,
gonna go
my
back to
bad.
bed, guys. You
Ah,
guys can take the rest of the terms. I'm done.
no, no, no. We need you. Come on,
All right,
stay.
I'll come back.
Perfect.
Well, I have to edit this episode anyway, so might as well listen to it. So yeah, it's not sleet, but it is tricky because in the winter time you can get thunderstorms, and it's a gray area. But we're talking like middle of July. There's a thunderstorm, and pellets of ice are coming down from the sky. More than likely, if not very likely, this is hail. And how hail develops essentially is, like Brad said, very cold aloft in the thunderstorm. These are 8 mile tall clouds. So up there, it's very, very cold, if not well below freezing. So you have raindrops that essentially there's lots of rain falling through the cloud, but you have wind. And we call these updrafts, where the wind is basically kind of going in the opposite direction up in the air, and it's pushing these raindrops up into these very cold air pockets. And like I said, it's very cold. It's below freezing. So what happens naturally is these super cooled rain droplets hit each other and they turn to ice. And there's a little distinction which you probably notice in your freezer. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but do you know how there could be clear ice and cloudy ice? Uh, this is like not just for hail, but in general. If you notice, your ice cubes are cloudy, if your ice cubes are clear.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you do notice that sometimes. Well, yeah, why is that?
Well, so I mean, for the ice cubes in the freezer, it's mostly because of the impurities. Essentially, there's not enough time for the water molecules to kind of like they bond together, I should say, very quickly. And when that happens, a lot of air pockets. It's very foggy. It gets very like cluttered, and it doesn't have that nice clear look to it. But if the water droplets that freeze together happen over time very slowly, less impurities, very pure water, like distilled water, will be clear if you put it at the right temperature and you don't have it like instantly turn to ice. So gradual freezing, so to speak. Same thing kind of hail, except you basically need the rain droplets, these super cool droplets, to kind of gradually form into ice chunks. If they hit each other really quickly and it's like these winds are really whipping up there and they're kind of running into each other, that's why you get like that very like the white hailstones, the very like foggy hailstones versus the clear centers that you sometimes see. So it all depends on really like how fast the water droplets are moving in the thunderstorm. So that's something that I found out that I didn't actually know, but something interesting with hail.
But I mean, usually they build up bigger and, just by riding those updrafts and downdrafts, correct?
colder. You're reaching a colder level in the atmosphere.
It doesn't have to fall as far either.
Exactly. Because like that's why Florida doesn't get a lot of hail. I mean, they do, but Florida gets tons of thunderstorms every single year. But not all of them have hail, if not a few. I mean, just this past week we had a couple that had really large hail, which was very rare for Florida. But you got to think about it because the cold air aloft is so high up, you need these hailstones to essentially be super large for them to actually make it to the ground. So just something that I found interesting about, and some stuff that I looked up that I didn't know about hail that I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and two, it also depends on the strength of your updraft too. Because if we have a hailstone that's held up by a certain level of updraft, the stronger the updraft, the more it can hold basically up aloft in the clouds. So once that hailstone gets heavy enough and that updraft can't support it anymore, that's when it falls to the ground.
Exactly. And actually, funny enough, when they're falling to the ground, did you know the average speed of a hailstone is 10 to 25 miles per hour?
Wow.
That's it?
Well,
I thought
yes,
it'd be
but
faster than that. It seemed
they
But
like it
then
would.
again, you want to add the weight and size to it.
you
It's
have to
coming
add the
down.
weights, the
Oh,
also
I
the
see.
updrafts, but there have been reports of large hailstones falling to the ground as high as 100 miles per hour. So
Oh
there
my
you go,
God.
Mike.
Ooh.
Imagine getting hit in the head with a hailstone at 100 miles per hour.
Well, I wouldn't
Um,
be here today then.
no, that's why hail's dangerous. I mean, people don't realize that. Like, I mean, it dents cars and it ruins crops. But like, if you're out there without a helmet and you have like half-dollar size hail coming down, I mean, it could hurt you. You can get a concussion, or if not, get seriously injured. Like, I mean, so it's funny you wear a helmet outside when it's hailing, but it's not the worst idea.
I'll tell you one thing you don't hear a lot about either. I mean, only because I play golf, but golf courses can get really damaged by. I mean, because the greens, if they get pelted by hail, I mean, it could take weeks before like the greens themselves can kind of heal them. There's nothing you can do. I mean, you can mow it down as much as you want, but there's still going to be dents in the green until it can actually kind of heal itself.
Well, Brad, they just hire you and they to go out there with that little tool and
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. Let's fix it. Let's fix the thousands of hail marks in the green, and
You know what I'm talking about? That little like double prong tool.
yeah, it's
They
the
just
the ball
yeah
mark fixer. Yeah.
yeah. You just go out there and fix all the greens that way.
Have you both seen that picture of the person that like it's a funny meme online, and like it's someone that has insurance but it doesn't cover like hail insurance, so they covered their car with pool noodles.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I think I
it,
saw something like that.
it's
Yeah.
funny and it makes sense. I mean, if you're out, some of these insurance plans don't cover like hail, and in places that get hail, like out even in like the Midwest and like the plains, like they can get, I mean, softball size hail. Imagine a softball sized hail hitting your car. I mean, we get pea size hail here in the Northeast, it's common, but like, I mean, a baseball hitting your car, multiple baseballs, I mean, it's gonna
Yeah,
crack
it's
your
gonna be a problem.
windshield. It's going to be problematic. Yeah. The largest hailstone, though, can anyone guess?
Yeah,
Oh,
didn't well, I don't know where. Well, I know they just broke the record though a couple of years ago, right? The newest one.
I think they did. So what I have on here, and it's probably not up to date, but it was 18 inches in circumference, 8 inches in
18.
diameter. So like
Oh,
eight
that's
eight
what I
inches
remember.
long is essentially what it is in South Dakota in 2010. But the circumference was 18. So you got to think about kind
Yeah,
of how big that is from just a perspective from top to bottom. That's a large hailstone.
8 rung in my head for sure. But it must have been the diameter I was thinking of because that's typically how we measure hailstones is by diameter.
That's like melon size. That's like it's like honeydew size, right?
Honeydew?
Honeydew,
Yeah,
yeah.
honeydew.
Honeydew.
Yeah,
Honeydew. Yeah. I
maybe.
mean,
What's the other one that they usually
grapefruit I
get?
think is like the highest like technical term because that's 4 inches. But when you get above 4 inches, there's really not. And it's interesting because the National Weather Service has so many names like pea-sized, penny, nickel, quarter, ping pong. I think like egg-sized hail is a thing. Egg-sized,
Never heard of
um,
egg before.
Hen egg
teacup-sized.
size. Yeah.
Hen egg size, yes.
Yeah.
Also mothball size apparently is half inch.
Mothball.
I
So there's
I
no
didn't know that.
cantaloupe size in there.
There's no cantaloupe. There's no pumpkin sized. I mean, we could think of so many shapes and sizes, but again, I digress.
By the way, don't you think cantaloupe kind of ruins a fruit salad? That's just
Ah,
me. But anyway.
I like cantaloupe. Well, if you don't get married and then you can't elope either. So all right,
Ah.
moving on. Here we go. All right, here's one that we've discussed before, only because I like the name of it because I'm 12 years old. But the word's haboob. But I'm gonna combine this. I'm gonna combine this with gust front because really you can't have a haboob without a gust front, but you can have a gust front without a haboob. So kind of what I'm getting at is basically if you've ever been outside and you kind of hear thunder in the distance and you know that there's probably storms in the forecast and you're not in harm's way yet, but you can kind of hear thunder in the distance, which is basically when you're supposed to go inside anyway. But if you look at the radar, you're like, oh wow, yeah, I still got the storm's at least 15, 20 miles away. However, a lot of times, especially if it's a good line of storms, they'll push out a big gust of wind ahead of it. And it's really not the storm itself, but what's called a gust front. And this thing could get out 5, 6, 10 miles in front of the main line of storms. And you may get you may go from a hot, steamy day to where there's hardly a breeze. All of a sudden, you get this gust of wind that's 20, 30, even 40 miles per hour. And it just comes out of nowhere, basically. And you know that you get that feeling like, oh, a storm's coming, a storm's brewing. But again, that's not the storm itself, but sometimes you can get some good gusts ahead of the storm, which is called the gust front. And once in a while the gust front itself can actually have stronger winds than the storm itself, because maybe the storms that are coming are collapsing, and that's why you're getting this gust front, and they're kind of pushing these winds out ahead of it so far. But usually doesn't cause damage, but you can kind of feel it. You know when there's a front or there's a storm coming.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say is if that gust front gets too far removed from the thunderstorm, that's a pretty good sign that the thunderstorm will start collapsing and weakening.
Right, because it's more stable then, yeah.
Right, and there's nothing for the thunderstorm to feed off of, no good warm air and all that.
I like a good gust front too.
But sometimes you can see that on radar too. You can see
Yes.
that little bit of a gust front line coming out from the main thunderstorm, and kind of, when us as forecasters see that, a lot of times I'm going, okay, let's see how far this thing goes, because if it keeps going, this thunderstorm might, die out, and now I don't have to warn anybody about a severe event coming in.
Now at the same time, we kind of call it like the outflow. It's more of a meteorological term, but sometimes, you get these storms. Like, let's take like Pennsylvania for an example, only because we're in this area in New Jersey. Maybe you have a line of storms coming through eastern Pennsylvania, and you get that good outflow or gust front. Then, as it's traveling across New Jersey towards the coast, it can sometimes interact with the sea breeze, which is actually pushing inland westward from off the Atlantic. And a lot of times in the summer, you'll get these interactions between the gust front from the west and the sea breeze moving west inland, and you'll get a new line of storms that develops right there along the sea breeze. So that's kind of a neat thing to watch on active days. But again, over to haboob, it's more of a southwestern U.S. term. You'll get this in the Middle East, where you have a lot of sand and desert areas. And basically, what it is a dust storm, but it's a dust storm that's kicked up by the outflow or the gust front of the thunderstorm. So, like I said earlier, you can't have a haboob without a gust front, but you can have a gust front without a haboob. But either way, you get into that haboob and it creates this dust and dust storm area where you can't see more than maybe couple of 100 yards in front of you. And Phoenix, you've seen before, they've kind of you get swallowed up by a gust front. You can see it from the air. I've seen drone footage of it, and it's pretty amazing to see these kind of things happen, and they just kind of travel their way across these desert areas.
I was gonna ask two things, Brad. One, do you know where the term haboob comes from?
It's an Arabic word, I know that, but I think it means like blasting or drifting.
Yes,
That's Yeah.
exactly. And something else too that I just looked up. So the term haboob was not actually used in the United States until 1971.
Really?
Yes, so apparently there was, dust storms obviously been happening before that, but a group of, I don't know if they're meteorologists or scientists, but the article that I read said that in Arizona in 1971, there was a dust storm so big, I mean, a really big dust storm, kind of in comparison with the ones in the Middle East. and they proposed calling it a haboob. Like, we should call these haboobs instead of dust storms. And I guess the society, American Meteorological Society, had an issue in their I guess their in their bulletin, talking about how they're very similar. And ever since then, most of these big dust storms out in the southwestern United States have been called haboobs.
Wow.
Before that, they weren't really called haboobs. They were just said, yeah, dust storms. But there you go. Little-
There you go. Another fun fact.
Well, anyway, with so much talk about thunderstorms and things associated with them, yeah, I mean, you guys just been taking the floor the whole time, it seems like. But
I'll stop talking, Mike.
there, there's a way to measure how strong a thunderstorm can get. And maybe some of our listeners have heard about it before, but it's called CAPE. And basically, what that stands for is convective available potential energy.
Wait,
Um,
I thought it was the thing that superheroes wear. Like, capes, right?
yeah, yeah.
No?
No, 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 no. Not
I'm wrong.
superheroes. Not the guy on Seinfeld that was the accountant or whatever of Costanza's dad there. But anyway, that might be too deep for some people who haven't seen Seinfeld that long. But anyway, convective available potential energy. So it's basically measuring the amount of energy available for convection or thunderstorm development. So basically, it's going to try to predict the vertical speed of an updraft. So the more cape you have, the better chance you have if a thunderstorm does form that it'll develop into a severe thunderstorm or a very strong thunderstorm. And typically, when we're talking about cape values, anything over 1,000 joules, it's measured in joules per kilogram. So anytime it's over 1,000, that's typically a day where you're considering, hey, these could be pretty good thunderstorms. And a lot of times these can go well over 2,000 joules and even 4 or 5,000 joules on really unstable days. And that's kind of what it's measuring. It's measuring you know, the potential of a thunderstorm to become very strong. So that's something I want to really get across, though, is the potential. Because if there's nothing to trigger a thunderstorm, nothing's going to happen.
And we use that as a tool also when we're trying to forecast.
Yeah, I mean, and you need a trigger. You could have all the cape in the world. You could have 5,000 joules of cape. And if there's nothing to trigger it, if there's no gust front like Brad talked about, or a sea breeze boundary, or a cold front, or something like that, um, you'll just never get a thunderstorm to pop. So it's quite an interesting thing that we look for when we're trying to forecast severe weather. But if you ever see anybody talk about CAPE, that's what they're talking about. It's just a measure of the instability in the atmosphere that could be utilized by any thunderstorms.
Yeah, and we see that all the time, and especially as we get into June, July, and August, the heart of the severe weather, and you get these juicy thunderstorms, and that's definitely something we look at on our prognosticating.
Yeah, and a lot of times, if you want a high cape day or if you're looking for a lot of cape, you usually want it to be, warm, and you also want it to be very, or a lot of moisture in the atmosphere too. So with a lot of moisture and a lot of warmth and a cold air mass aloft, that's how you get a lot of cape going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, cold.
Well,
Well, I should say it's warm at the surface, so don't get that confused with when I said the cold air aloft. So people are probably like, "Wait, you just said warm, and then it had to be cold. What are you talking about?"
right. Well,
But cold way up there.
we were talking about that before. Yeah, thunderstorms like that cold air aloft. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking up, above 15,000, 20, 30,000 feet where we want it to be cold.
Well, I think that brings us to Mike again.
Yes. So in the theme of thunderstorms, and even not just thunderstorms, but just any sort of event that produces rain, um, have you ever noticed? And I'm sure you both have, and this is a very common thing that you could see. But sometimes when it's a nice day, you look out in the distance, there's thunderstorm or just clouds in general, and you see what looks to be rain falling in the distance. And if you look up from like your vision, you could almost see like the rain falling in like a column, and then it starts to dissipate or like fade out as you go closer to the ground. So this is something that is interesting because it happens a lot, not just in thunderstorms and rainstorms, but just in general with any sort of precipitation falling. It could happen in the wintertime too. We call it virga. And virga is essentially just precipitation, to put it simply, that doesn't make it to the ground. Usually, when you look at a radar app on your phone, sometimes you'll see that it picks up rain or snow, depending on what season you're in. And it's, sometimes you might go out there and look at your phone and look at the sky and say, hey, what gives, guys? My app says it's supposed to be raining right now, but I don't feel a single drop. So that essentially is kind of what happens. Is there's just so much dry air between the column where the rain is falling or the snow is falling, depending on how cold it is, and the ground. And sometimes on a very dry day, and we'll get to dew point in a little bit, and then I'll explain kind of how that works. But sometimes the dew points are just kind of too low, and the difference in moisture from the ground and the air above us is just too great, and the precip just kind of fizzles out, and it just doesn't have enough moisture to carry it along. So something interesting, and it's an interesting phenomenon that happens a lot, and people always ask, well, why is it not raining? And there you go. That's the reason.
Yeah, just too much dry air at the surface, and it just evaporates on you before it actually reaches
Pretty much,
the
yeah.
ground. And sometimes, kind of going with Brad's Anvil topic from earlier, you can even see some virga in that instance when you get the anvil blowing off very high thunderstorms, up there. And it'll look like on radar, you can sometimes see like it looks like a light rain or something spreading over the
Exactly.
area, but it's not. It's just the anvil of the thunderstorm and stuff getting blown off the top, and then never reaches the ground. So it's not like Mike said. It's not only a wintertime phenomena.
Yeah, and if you're in a plane, you're probably driving through it, or driving through it. You're trying to drive through a cloud.
You can drive through a cloud, though.
Oh,
Just
yeah, technically you can. Yes,
fog is technically a cloud that's
Yeah,
next to the surface.
but if you're in a plane and the plane is low enough in the rain
the
shaft, you could
plane, the
actually,
plane.
you know, have rain. But
Does the rain in Spain fall mainly on the plane?
well, it depends, Brad. If it's too dry,
That's true too.
it's not gonna fall. See, there we
Uh,
go.
Brad with his dead jokes
I
over and
know.
over
Getting...
again.
All right, Brad. Well, give us the next term,
All right, all right. Well, this one's kind of a neat one because again, we're going to stay on the focus of thunderstorms here, and a lot of times, I guess the biggest issue, especially here in the Northeast, is the well, we get flooding too from thunderstorms, but also, we have wind damage. Yeah, we have hail too, but winds are basically the biggest, I guess, reason why we have severe storms here in the Northeast. It's not really a protocol to have a severe thunderstorm to produce flooding. Flooding is just a result of it. But the reason why a lot of times we have severe thunderstorm watches or warnings are because of straight line winds. And basically, what that is it's the gust front that we were talking about, but this is more the downburst part of the thunderstorm. And what happens is it's so fast, and sometimes you get these winds that Mike were talking about earlier with the hail, it gets so up and down, updrafts and downdrafts. Eventually, the downdrafts may usually win. They usually win out, and that's kind of where the storm may actually start to collapse. But at the same time, these winds are so strong and they're moving vertically downward towards the ground that when they hit the ground, there's only one place for them to go, and that's for them to spread out parallel to the ground, and basically that's your straight line wind. And if it exceeds 58 miles per hour, then the storm's classified really by the National Weather Service as severe. And these winds can create cause a lot of damage, especially when you get to 50, 60 miles per hour, and it's not unheard of with a severe thunderstorm in the summertime to create these kinds of wind speeds. Now, a lot of folks will say, oh, a tornado had to come through here. Look at the uprooted trees, and look at all the damage here to the side of the house. But a lot of times folks will think that there was a tornado that came through, and usually the thing that, and only because I've covered this before, I've been to a tornado outbreak afterwards, and the difference is if there's trees that are snapped like in the middle of the tree, that's usually tornado damage, where they're just knocked down right and they're just like kind of sawed off. If trees are uprooted, and from the ground up, usually that's just from the straight line winds. But these winds also caused by a microburst. Same kind of idea. The wind is forced down so fast out of the storms that it's pushed outward once it hits the ground, and this is what causes the strong wind gusts and straight line winds, and the damage that goes along with it. But we've seen a lot of instances of this, almost every summer.
Yeah, and most of the time when we deal with straight line winds, a good indicator too is that everything is kind of laid over in the same direction. You might see a cornfield or something like that. Everything's kind of laid over in the same direction, or the trees are knocked down the same direction. But if you had something like a tornado, then you would see some sort of, you know, uh, turning in that direction, or the trees fell down in opposite directions or something, and that's just showing the circulation around that tornado.
And you'll see on TV a lot of times the Weather Channel will go to a area that got devastated by tornadoes, and you'll see the devastation. I mean, it's almost completely, you can't, you don't. I mean, you can easily see the difference between straight line winds and where there was a tornado. And as I said earlier, personally, when I used to work at the TV station down in Charleston, they sent me down to Lady Lake, Florida, after an outbreak. And I can't remember. I know it was in February. I can't remember the year because the Super Bowl was going on, but I was down there firsthand to actually investigate it, and went down there for the station and do some reporting for it. And it was just, as soon as I got down there, and you got out of the car, all you smell is thick pine, and the trees were just snapped right in the middle. I mean, it was just flattened, and it's just, you could. I mean, I saw the difference, and after that, I just know there's a difference between tornadoes, and that's when the Weather Service comes out, and they'll investigate an area maybe in South Jersey or somewhere, in the Northeast, that may have had a tornado, and usually that'll be the difference between whether it was straight line winds, or it was a tornado damage. So, but most of the time it's straight line damage for us.
Yeah, I mean, and in order to get that type of wind damage from straight line winds, you need a lot of wind shear. And that's the next term I wanted to talk about, was wind shear. So basically, what wind shear is a change of speed or direction with height as you go up into the atmosphere. And that's important to thunderstorms, because if you didn't have any wind shear, basically what would happen is the cloud would develop, the storm would start rising, and if there's no shear to blow that cloud one way or another, it just goes directly up and it goes directly down with the downdraft, and that rain cooled air basically kills the source of the warm moist air for that thunderstorm, and it just kind of collapses on itself. These are typically called pulse thunderstorms, actually. A lot of times you can get these in Florida, where they just kind of go up and
Hard to
down.
predict. Yeah, that's for sure, where they're going to pop up. They're basically pop up thunderstorms, but they get intense.
Right, exactly. And sometimes these can go severe. It's not totally out of the realm of possibility. Usually you need a lot of cape, like we were talking about earlier, to get that to happen. But typically the severe would be very quick and over fast. But in a sheared environment, if we have a lot of wind shear going on, what happens is that thunderstorm cloud starts to tilt, because the winds higher up in the atmosphere are going faster than what they are at the surface. And what that does is that allows the updraft to tilt and stay away from that rain cooled air. So the thunderstorm can still suck in all that, warm air and all that moisture that feeds it and makes it bigger. And there's no contamination from that rain cooled air. So that's what helps these thunderstorms grow. If you have a lot of wind shear, they can grow and they can sustain themselves into lines and into segments, into maybe even a derecho if the things are right.
All right, Joe, not the D
Um,
word.
yeah, I know. It's just basically a prolonged windstorm from a convective complex that works through the area. But yeah, that's what you need with the wind shear. You need a good amount of wind shear if you want really strong, long-lasting thunderstorms. Not that anybody wants that, but if you're forecasting that, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for all that cape. You're looking for a lot of wind shear. And sometimes with wind shear, it's like I said, it's not only a speed shear situation, it could be a directional shear, where maybe the winds out of the surface are coming out of the south, but aloft they're coming more out of the westerly direction. So that will cause a turn within the atmosphere, or it could even turn that cloud or cause some rotation within that cloud. And that's when we start having trouble with tornadoes, because once you get a cloud that starts to circulate and rotate, you get something called the supercell, and those are the ones that can spawn tornadoes, not your typical, squall line.
Usually ahead of the main line itself, discrete storms as we call them.
Yes. Yeah, usually they're on their own too.
Yeah.
So yeah, wind shear super important to getting big thunderstorms when we head into the spring and summer. Oh, and it looks like I'm still up.
Look at you, Mike.
Hey,
Yeah, 2-for-1 special.
2 for 1. Okay, so we're talking about all kinds of ingredients with a thunderstorm. So hey, I think this kind of fits. So we talked about CAPE, which is the energy available for a thunderstorm to develop. We talked about wind shear, which helps sustain thunderstorms and make them stronger. But we still need some triggers, right? We still need something to make that atmosphere pop and make the cloud and make the storm. So typically that's done by a cold front or gust fronts or sea breezes, like we talked about earlier. However, there's something out in the plains and a lot of times in Texas that
Yeah,
happens.
Texas is a hot spot.
Yeah, it's something called a dry line. So what a dry line is, it's not like a really bad joke that Brad tells, but
You mean
That was good. That was
a
really
dry
good.
punchline?
yeah, yeah, definitely not that. What a dry line is in weather. Sorry, Brad, I had to take that one out.
That's right.
But what a dry line is in weather is basically a, a demarcation between much drier air that's typically coming off, the desert Southwest in the United States, and more moist air that's coming into the Gulf and in through Texas. And they kind of meet right there at the dry line, where that warm air meets that high moisture air, or sorry, the dry air meets the moist air. And so what happens is, why does that create a thunderstorm? It's just a difference in the amount of humidity in the air. So why would that be a big deal, right? So what you need to know is that air with a lot of moisture in it is more buoyant or less dense than dry air. So the dry air kind of cuts underneath it because it's really dense and pushes into that more buoyant, moist air, which kind of floats higher in the atmosphere. It gets pushed above that dense, dry air. So that's kind of how it works here. It's almost like how a cold front moves in and cold air undercuts the warm air. Same idea here, because the dry air is more dense. It runs into that moist air, which is more buoyant, and that's forced aloft. And that gives you that little trigger to develop thunderstorms. And a lot of times, these dry line situations can really trigger some big
I was gonna say they
supercells.
usually trigger severe weather down there.
Yeah, it's something that storm chasers really look for in Texas and in the plain states. When they're looking to chase those big storms and those big supercells. And sometimes even there's something called a dry line bulge, what they're kind of looking for too. And that actually is a place that's a little more apt to fire a thunderstorm. And it basically just looks like you know, uh, just like a push further out from the dry line. So it's not straight, it's kind of curved and pushing out into the moist air a little bit more. Yes,
But I've never heard that word before. That's see, I learned things
a
on
dry
there.
line bulge.
Bulge,
Yeah,
yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
did you say a Bowie?
A
Like
David
a
Bowie.
David Bowie?
David Bowie.
Okay, these
Well, you know what?
jokes.
And one thing while we're on the dry lines, we're talking about pulse thunderstorms, and sometimes we have an idea that it's going to be an active afternoon, but we can't say for sure that there's going to be a thunderstorm right here or a thunderstorm right here. And again, we'll know a couple of days in advance. Usually these dry line setups, I mean, I've seen on Twitter and some of these, plane planes, like these storm chasers, like you said, Mike, they know this thing 5-6 days ahead of a time when they have it's a good setup. They'll say, wow, check out the setup here for Eastern Texas on day 5, next Saturday. I mean, they'll have an idea already that there's going to be an outbreak, that far out.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that they're looking for, and definitely something that is the potential trigger for the thunderstorms that they're looking for. Um, but once we get those storms to form, then we got to warn for them, right, Mike?
Mike Priante with the final term, it looks like.
Is it the final term?
No, it's not the final term. Brad's just jumping ahead.
Oh,
Are
yeah,
you
no,
trying
you're
to
right.
get
You're
out of
right.
here or something? You got
No,
something
I
somewhere
thought
to
we were.
be?
Sounds like Brad wants to leave. Hey, I mean, I wanted to. I don't even know if I wanted to be here in the first place, and here I am. So,
Ah,
of
nice.
Oh, you wanted to be here. Come on now.
course I did. Yeah, but no, yeah. So we have watches and warnings, and also advisories. But essentially, what I like talking about this, I like to compare it to, and I'm sure you probably both have heard about this, a taco watch and a taco warning. No,
What?
you haven't. No, okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I've
It's
seen this
also
on
a
Twitter. Yeah.
cupcake watch and a cupcake warning, and it's very similar.
It's
So
actually smart, though. Yeah.
it's very smart for those that don't really want to hear the technical terms. So I'm going to talk about the technical term first, and then we'll talk about the fun. The
So if
fun.
I put taco in my next heads up notification, you know why.
Well, it would be fun. Um, a taco watch has been issued for your area.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
watch
Mike,
out.
go.
Yeah, okay. So watches essentially mean when the conditions for an event, whether it's a severe thunderstorm watch or a winter storm watch, it means the conditions for that event are around. It's possible that this could happen, but it doesn't mean that this is occurring. It means that the conditions are there. A warning means that the conditions are there and there is an event that is occurring that is either reaching that criteria or is right about to. So winter storm warnings meaning that, well, it's snowing and it's probably going to reach the criteria that was issued in the watch, or a severe thunderstorm warning means there's a thunderstorm that is reaching or about to reach the criteria that was listed in the watch. And to make it simpler for the listeners, a taco watch means that you have all of your ingredients for your tacos. You have the shells, you have the meats, you have the tomatoes, the lettuce, the cheese. It's all on the table, but it's not a taco. It's just ingredients. A taco warning means, uh-oh, watch out, someone made a taco. It's right there, the meat and the cheese and the lettuce. It's all in the taco, and it's on the
I like it.
table. And there you go. It's a taco. It's cupcake watch and warning is very similar. Same idea. The flour, the eggs, everything's on the table, but it's not a cupcake. But then you put it in the oven, and out comes a cupcake. Oh, now it's a warning. We got cupcakes.
All right, we got enough with the taco warning. My goodness. Do
Hey, I like tacos.
you put guacamole on tacos, by the way?
I like guacamole, yes.
I like guacamole on tacos.
I just eat the avocado by itself.
Uh,
Boring.
avocado
Yeah,
toast,
that's the
avocado
healthier
toast.
option, correct?
Yeah, it is. Cause I mean, guacamole, you put you have like the lime juice, you have salt, you have cilantro and onions. But honestly, guacamole's not unhealthy. I mean,
No,
you
it's
do put
not.
a couple of things. I think the only thing that makes it unhealthy is like putting salt and like lime in it. Like maybe it's acidic, but
Probably all the chips that you eat with it.
it's probably the chips. You're right.
Yeah.
The chips probably are what's not good for you, but the avocado is very high in fiber. It's very good for you. So good job, Brad.
Yeah, I like that taco warning and watch. I'll have to remember that in the future if anybody asks.
Yeah. So I think based off of that, I think we are now going to be talking about a dew point watch, right, Mike?
Yeah, well, there is no watches for dew point, that's for sure. You know, that would be kind of every day.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, no, what the dew point is, I just want to bring up the dew point, because we're talking about moisture in the air, and the dew point is a really good measure of how much moisture is in the air. And basically, the dew point is the temperature at which you can get condensation. So that's pretty much how it is when the temperature falls to the dew point, and you get condensation on things. So, think about almost like a can of soda or something like that, or your favorite adult beverage, how it gets the water on the outside of the glass or the can. That's what's happening there. The temperature hit the dew point, and the water vapor condenses onto the can surface. So that's what the dew point is. And it is very important. We like to talk more about dew point than we do relative humidity when we get into the summertime months, because sometimes the relative humidity can seem quite low. Maybe it's like 52%.
Yeah,
But
it's not a great way to measure it. Yeah.
right, and that's we want to. It obviously gets very humid in the summer, and we want a good way to measure that. So that's why we like to use the dew point a little bit more. Because put it this way, if you have an air temperature of 90 and the dew point is 70, your humidity is like 52%. Your
But yeah,
relative
it's
humidity.
oppressive outside.
However, that is an awful day. um, and if you want to think about it in terms of, well, what dew points in the summer are something you should be concerned about. Well, if it's between 50 and 60 degrees, it's typically a comfortable day. That dew point temperature really doesn't cause any problems. When you start getting to a dew point of 60 to 65, it's starting to get a little bit sticky out there. And then once you hit 65 to 70, that's unpleasant. And anything above 70 is just downright gross. I mean, there's really no other way to explain it.
You just don't want to go outside anymore.
Yeah, it's just like you go out and you feel like you're underwater. And I don't know. Maybe I have to go out to the desert Southwest and experience some of that dry heat, because all the humidity and moisture in the air here on the East Coast is pretty unbearable sometimes. And we got a good way to measure that though, right? And that's heat index, correct?
Yeah, so Mike, I mean, heat index is something that's very interesting, and it's a good way of kind of, as you mentioned, explaining just kind of how hot it really feels. It's not really like a measured air temperature. You don't really you're not really getting this through a thermometer, but it's sort of what your body thinks the air temperature is. And it's a combination of, like you said, it's the humidity in the air and the actual air temperature, and also kind of what your body feels. So the skin, as we know, when we get hot, we sweat, and the sweat evaporates, and that's how we cool our bodies, and it prevents our bodies from overheating. But sometimes when you have enough moisture in the air, the sweat on your body sticks around, and that kind of causes your body to not be able to cool down as easily, so you end up basically staying hotter than what you would with a drier air mass. That's kind of what heat index is trying to portray. So when you have, a dew point of 72 degrees and it's 90 degrees out, it's going to feel pretty hot. I mean, I'm looking at the chart right now, and a dew point of 70 and an air temperature of 90 is about like a 97-degree heat index. So that's as if you were standing out on a 97-degree day. Um, but again, it's all relative, and essentially it doesn't really make a difference in terms of what your thermometer is measuring. It's really just a term that we use as humans to kind of say, okay, this is bad for our bodies. It's so hot and humid that we have to make sure that we continue to take fluids, because it means that you're sweating more because your body doesn't know what to do. It's trying to evaporate and it's not happening. So it's like, let's
Right.
sweat more. Let's
Yeah.
sweat more. Let's get more of the water out of our bodies. And it's like, no, that's bad.
Right, and
Because
that's an important thing that our listeners should know, is that this we sweat because we want the sweat to evaporate off our skin, and evaporation is a cooling process. So that's how our bodies try to cool themselves down. We don't pant like dogs. We sweat.
no, that's our
Um,
that's our panting. It's the sweat.
yeah, so that's what the problem is when you have a very humid day. There's so much moisture in the air, is that evaporation process doesn't happen as quickly.
Right. Then you can
Um,
get heat exhaustion, and the worst
ugh,
case scenario, you get heat stroke, and then you have issues. Yeah.
yeah, I can't believe I didn't get that. Any of those heat exhaustions or heat strokes. Like I'm
Maybe you
thinking back
did.
to like
Man.
I'm thinking back to my landscaping days, or maybe when I was playing football and doing double sessions or something like that. With some of those hot days, man, maybe did have it. I don't know. Maybe that's why I'm messed up today.
Yeah, yeah.
One other final thing with heat index is you can actually use the relative humidity to determine heat index. So it's not just dew point, but I think as meteorologists, I think it's better to portray the dew point, because when someone says on on the news or somewhere you hear, oh yeah, we have a 90% relative humidity day, and it's like, okay, but what's the dew point? Because if it's like 45 degrees and the air temp is like 45 and it's like 100% relative humidity, that's not humid. 45-degree dew point is your body. You're not sweating when it's 45
Right.
degrees out, unless you're like really working hard and
That's
But
awful damp and clammy, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
damp and
Ooh.
clammy, but it's not enough to get you to get heat exhaustion. Um, so, but it's something that you can definitely measure. But again, dew point, relative humidity are both things you could use plus the temperature to get the heat index. So.
Well, that's really great. I mean, I think we covered all our weather terms here. And Brad, you have one more last dry joke to tell us here before we're
Nah,
out? You're
I think
tapped
I'm
out.
good. Yeah, I think I've
Good, because another joke, I was gonna walk out the door, just
Yeah.
leave.
Well, we're all gonna walk out the door right now because that's about the end of our show here. So,
yeah.
Oh man, it was a good time. I'm glad you guys had me on. I'll
yeah,
be
thanks
back
for being
again.
here.
I
Yeah,
may
I
lose some
know.
weather terms for in the fall. You never know.
Maybe
Yeah.
we're running out of terms though.
No, you never run out of weather terms.
Oh, there's so many terms,
We
man.
should do a podcast on jokes and weather, or weather and jokes.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
Like what was that book? Oh no, what was that movie? Cloudy with a Chance
Yeah.
of Meatballs.
Yeah, no, but there was. I thought somebody had a book in the office one time of
Oh
weather
yeah,
jokes.
we'll
Oh
have to
man,
go
I
look.
got to go find that. But anyway, that's it for our episode for this week. Thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget that we have a new podcast every 2 weeks here on the Weather Lounge, so be sure to come back and listen. And also, rate our podcast. That helps us push our show forward. And don't forget to visit WeatherWorks on social media. And as always, find us at weatherworksinc.com. So that's it for this episode. And thanks, everybody, for joining us.